Okay, so I think we can start now. Just to confirm, is my screen still visible?
Yes.
Okay. Sure. So this session is kind of an overview to the different things you can do while you're pursuing your BTech at college and the different kind of activities you could involve in and different skills you could gain. So by no means is one expected or required to gain all skills that we are going to discuss today. And this is just to give you an introduction to the different fields so that you know what all you could possibly do in your BTech, and then you could start pursuing things that you think you would enjoy exploring. So let's begin. Um, so it isn't where you come from, it's where you're going that counts. So we'll discuss some things that you could do in college. The most obvious ones that come to mind would be that you could participate in college clubs and societies. You can organize events with them. You could participate in hackathons and have independent side projects too. If you're a dev kind of person, you could complete a minors course or honors in college, which is a great option for those of you who have that in your college. Triple IT definitely has minors courses as well as an honors course. So you could pursue that. And it goes without saying, you could get a good CGPA and you could select project oriented courses that help you learn to implement the skills that you are learning in your course. So apart from that, there are a few other things that you could pursue as per your interests. One could be applying for scholarships. Then you could apply for internships and full-time roles. You can pick up research projects. You can contribute to open source projects. You can participate in competitive programming contests, prepare for higher studies, and explore entrepreneurship. So we'll be discussing each one of these briefly in today's session, and hopefully it'll help you get started in whichever field you're interested. So here is a brief overview of the fields that are involved within CS and also the interdisciplinary fields and electronics. So starting with CS, you can see a short list over here, ML and data science being one. There is NLP, computer vision, and so this all of this would go into the category of data science broadly speaking. Then you can also work in app development for Android, iOS, or web. You can look into operating systems and compilers. There's networks and security and parallel computing as well. Then there's semantic web and programming languages too. So each one of these are some of the broad headers or categories within CS. Then we have certain interdisciplinary fields as well, which would be CS in integration with certain other skills. For example, you have human-computer interaction, or you have human-machine interaction. Then you could have applied mathematics and computing. So some of these would already be being explored or studied by you in your BTech, and you could also pursue these for research or other interests. So there is also computational bioscience. There could be neuroscience. Fintech and cryptocurrency is a rising field. Then there is social science and speech processing too. Then there are several fields within electronics as well. There is VLSI, wireless communication, radar systems, embedded systems, control and robotics, Internet of Things, which is well known. There's signal processing, circuits and systems, and artificial intelligence. So let's start with competitive programming. Brinda, would you like to give an overview?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you so much, Bhavya. Right. What exactly is competitive programming? Like some of you might not be aware. So, it's basically like a logic solving problem by code, right? So, they are mostly like time contests, and you're giving a set of questions, and more emphasis on based on how your logic and how well you're able to solve the question rather than your coding skills. So, it's like anybody can write a code. Like I can write a code which runs in 2 days, but that does not mean I've written a good code. So to judge if a code is good, like what matters is how fast it runs, how much space it takes, how many resources it consumes. So competitive programming sort of tests that and ensures that like your logic and your mental ability of how you're solving the problems is good. Um, yeah. So some people, think like, why should we do competitive programming in college and things like that. So I think one of the most important things with competitive programming is that it helps you develop your mental skills and it helps you develop logic and problem solving ability. So it's not a lot to do with coding, but more to more about logic and the way you approach problems and different things. And I think like it's super helpful like if you are interested in like tech roles, ST, and plus like I really enjoyed. I think competitive programming has been a very fun part of my college life. You make so many friends and you participate in so many contests, which is just like fun in general. So where to start, like if you are interested in like trying out competitive programming but you don't know where to start, so Code Forces is like a very good website. So people all over the world like participate in contests there. So they're like I think bi-weekly they have like 2 hour long contests. So competitive programming is not something you have to do every day and you have to invest a lot of time. Like what is important is how regular you are and you're just having fun with it. Okay, so like there are Code Forces, CodeChef, like these are some good platforms to start. And there's also like FUBAR, which is like the competitive programming club of our college. The activities they organize are very good for starting with competitive programming. Plus, like Geeks and YouTube have some really good resources. So you shouldn't think of competitive programming as a way to prepare for like internships or jobs, but it's more like learning. And along the way, you develop enough skill that if you're trying to participate in like interview for internships and jobs, then it like helps you. So for the next one. Yeah. So internships and FTs. So like this is basically one of so internships and FTs is basically like the software developer role or job which some people might be interested in pursuing after their BTech, right? So in general, the process for like any company, like it starts with submitting your resume or CV, which they mostly look at things like
Vrinda, I think people are saying that you're having an issue with your microphone and I'm also having difficulty hearing. Could you do something about
okay,
that?
yeah, sure. Just give me 2 seconds. Try to change. Just 2 seconds. I'll reach. Hi guys, is my voice better now or is it still bad?
It's a lot better.
Okay. Yeah. So really sorry about that. So should I repeat something previously or is people in the chat room let me know? Okay, I think let's like continue from here only. Right. So basically, internships and FTs, like this is the general process for like a software developer role, right? So the general process could be first you're submitting your resume or CV. There, the main emphasis would be on your GPA in college and the projects which you have done so far, the talks, etc., which you have worked on, right? And in general, extracurricular activity or competitions, hackathons, things like that, which you participated. So all of these things play like a very equally important role in shortlisting your resume. So there are some companies which focus mostly on GPA and how good that is, but there are some companies who don't care about your GPA and a lot of emphasis on the projects which you have done and things like that. Right? And after that, there is sometimes like, especially for on-campus processes, there's like maybe a competitive like programming round where they shortlist candidates based on their skills, and then technical interviews where for companies like Google, Microsoft, or like for SDE roles, they target DSA and competitive programming and things like that. And then plus like you'll have HR interviews finally where they'll try to check if you are a good fit for the company and for the role, after which you get like an offer letter or a rejection letter, right? Bhavya? So how to prepare? So first thing is having a good profile. So it's like being more involved in projects and like trying to do some good projects. Like as Bhavya mentioned, there are a lot of courses which have very good projects to do and you learn a lot through them. So I would highly recommend to do that. Plus like even under professors who can join projects. So I think that would be discussed more in the end of the session. Plus like maintaining a good GPA. So I would say it's not like the end of the world if you don't have like a really great GPA or you don't have a good project. You should just like try to focus on one thing and make that your strongest point. You shouldn't try to be like, oh, this should be really good also, or that should be really good also. Just try to do your best and do things which you know that you are really interested in. Like if you don't like doing competitive programming, you don't have to do competitive programming for like internship and FP. Like it's not necessary at all. It's like mostly based on your skill set and interests, right? But DSA skills, data structures and algorithms are like those are like some basic things which most of the companies look for, because apart from your programming skills, what it mainly tells is your thinking ability and how well you are able to approach it. So LeetCode is a really good place to practice from even like for online rounds or for technical interviews. Plus, you can like always contact your seniors. I think Triple ITD especially, all the seniors are super helpful. So if you just message them and ask them for a mock interview or like any help like in general regarding some process, they would be really happy to help. So yeah, as I mentioned, like companies, different companies have different criteria. So some like companies look for more emphasis on like logical and thinking skills. Like maybe companies like Google, they only check for DSA and like how good that is. But some companies are purely based on projects and how good your work there is, or like the research work which you do. Okay. This is mostly covering the on-campus process, right? So off-campus process is almost the same once you get an interview call. But to get an interview call, you have to make sure that you have like a good LinkedIn profile also. And you're trying to, like, if you just try to search for opportunities which you really want to apply for, I would say off-campus is not that difficult to do. You just have to be very regular, and it is definitely time consuming, because you have to continuously search to find some good opportunities. So in LinkedIn, there are a lot of good recruiters like and people and your alumni who are well placed. You can always reach out to them and they would be very happy to give you a referral, like for all the companies abroad and in India. And like I think even in the Women in Tech group, I think a lot of people message when they want to, they're ready to give out a referral. So keep on a lookout for these opportunities and
So let's move on to another opportunity that you can grab during your studies. So scholarships. Why should one even apply for a scholarship? So the most compelling reason is that several scholarships are very prestigious and they are very competitive. So with the scholarship, you can basically tell that yes, you have a certain level of competency and you are learning new things on the way. The second most important reason would be that you get to connect with communities and like-minded people. This really goes a long way when you know that you have like-minded people who are in similar situations as you, and you can collaborate with them for better learning opportunities and resources too. The third reason could be that you could possibly get an opportunity to travel, attend conferences and workshops in India or maybe even abroad. So that's a great plus point. Then obviously you would receive a stipend amount with most scholarships, which you can use for your educational purposes. And lastly, the application process really helps you in learning about yourself. When you answer the essay questions or you write a resume about yourself, it really lets you reflect and think about your journey so far, feel proud, and then also think about the future directions and steps that you want to take. So a few scholarship opportunities are listed over here. Some of these are research internship oriented scholarships, for example, the Adobe Women in Tech Scholarship. Others would be related to some sort of conferences or workshops, for example, the Grace Hopper Scholarship. And and as well as the Generation Google Scholarship, which was previously known as Google Women Tech Makers. So you can read about each of these scholarships, and you can also find their timelines as to when their applications open and when you can apply for them. So now we'll be briefly discussing that what all are the requirements that are generally needed when you're applying for a scholarship. The first most basic thing is the age criteria or university enrollment. Most scholarships require you to be 18 plus or be enrolled at a university currently. So that's highly likely to be true or valid for most of you. Then the second important thing that some scholarships require would be letters of recommendation. So these are taken from professors or maybe even managers or mentors whom you have worked with in an internship, let's say, or generally professors at your institute whom you have worked with, who could tell about you and who could tell about your inclinations as a person and as a person in tech. So you can generally approach your professors whom you have worked with on some research projects, or you could also approach them based on your performance in the course. So in case you haven't yet worked on any research project with any prof, you could still try and approach them based on your performance in a particular course. You can mention about your interactions that you've had with them, or specific projects that you made in the course, or how you stood out in those projects, or even the same goes for assignments. So most professors highly, like if you're in your second year, it's highly likely that a professor would agree to give you an LR just based on your performance in their course, because you're not expected to have done some research work with them so far. So don't limit yourself upon seeing this requirement. You could still approach professors freely. Then the next requirement could be essay questions or the letter of motivation. So this requires you to generally talk about your journey in tech or computer science so far, how you got started and where you're going right now. Then it could also ask you about how you wish to contribute or give back to the community. It can question you about your aspirations, goals, motivations, passions, and challenges that you have faced in tech so far, especially for the scholarships that are for women and non-binary genders. They would ask you about the challenges you've faced in tech so far, and you can focus on challenges that you've personally faced, and you can talk about personal instances. That will help them understand how you are persevering through and really looking forward to being a part of the tech community. Then the last, like another sample question or requirement could be that why do you want or deserve the particular scholarship that you're applying for, or what do you expect in return from the scholarship? So yeah, then another important requirement when you're applying for a scholarship would be your resume. So this is a general tip for all resumes, but especially for scholarships, that you should include highly relevant 3 to 4 projects, and you should definitely demonstrate your leadership skills and community involvement if you're applying for a scholarship. This would let them know that you are striving continuously to be a part of the community. And it is highly recommended that you restrict your resume to 1 page and highlight only the essential information, because the reviewers would be going through multiple resumes at once. So you could also get it reviewed online. We'll share a few resources and links where you could do this, or you could share it with your friends and seniors for them to review and provide feedback to you. Ria, would you like to take up open source?
Sure. So first of all, I'd like to introduce that what is open source. So the term open source refers to something which people can modify, enhance, and then share because it's publicly available. So essentially, open source softwares allow people to build upon an existing piece of code or existing tool that is there. So if you feel that you haven't used or haven't heard about any open source software, here are some of the many examples of open source tools and technologies. For instance, I'm sure you must have used Android or Linux or OpenOffice or a Mozilla Firefox. So these are some applications which are widely used by people across the world, and it's very likely to be used on a daily basis. So next, let's move on to why it's important to contribute in open source. So first point is that it's transparent. So let's imagine a scenario where there's no library or any tools or any piece of code which is available online. And while you're building any tool, you'll have to code all the sub functionalities and sub functionalities within it. That would be really hard, right? So the most important reason for using and contributing to open source is that, like I said, you get to enhance the tool, you get to build upon the existing tool, existing piece of code, and not have to build it from scratch. The second point is that there's a community, like the diverse community and the open source culture that it provides. So there are people from different parts of the world who come together to build something. So it's always an enriching experience to interact with such a strong community and understand their vision. The next is vast impact. So, like I said, there are millions of people who are using and contributing to open source softwares. So imagine like your even one feature addition or even a small bug fix that you do, the impact of that is tremendous. So you could serve potentially serve like millions of people sitting right across just by fixing a small piece of code. So the next part is about remote collaboration. And personally for me, while I was doing Google Summer of Code, I had 4 mentors, all of them in remote areas with different time zones. So remotely collaborating with them, understanding their viewpoints, then writing clean code, and so that the entire community can understand and then again build upon it. So that was a huge learning for me. And it definitely is a very important key point that why it's important to contribute to open source. Also, it's highly valued in industry. It's because of the open source spirit and about the remote collaboration. There are some job openings also which specifically demand that you need to have some open source collaboration or contribution prior to even applying. Let's move on to the next slide. Yeah, so these are some of the student programs that you must have heard of or you must have seen across in the logos. So Google Summer of Code is one of them, Outreachy is one of them, Girl Script Summer of Code, there's Google Season of Docs, etc. So you could look at each one of these websites and try to see what is the eligibility criteria, what are the timelines, and how like if what accordingly you could prepare for them. We could like at the end of this slide we'll have a Excel sheet linked, and we'll add all these links also. But you can also, these are very easy to Google links, so you could search them up. So there are majorly 4 steps to go about usually any such program. The first step is selecting a project. So basically what happens is that each organization provides a list of projects that they potentially want to do in the summer. So if that project matches your interest, your skill set, and you find it interesting, you could communicate with the community. So you could tell your mentors that this is the project that you're interested in. You could apply there, and you could start contributing to that specific project and that specific organization. That would mean that you could look up the issues list, you could look up some small bugs that you could fix. You could there are some organizations which also give some micro tasks prior to their application, so you could you could complete those micro tasks, understand the tools and technologies which are involved in that project. It's not necessary that whatever tools and technologies that are mentioned on the project page you need to know all of them. It's okay to learn on the go, and just be confident that it's not important that you should 100% be aware of whatever tools and technologies are mentioned. Then the next step is submitting a proposal. I'd say this is also a very key point, because a complete proposal would include what the project is about, what do you think, what your perception of the project is, how you propose to solve the project idea, the entire timeline distributed, like let's say it's a project of 3 months and you try to divide it into different timelines, and that's also a very key point when you add it to your proposal, because it shows that you have understood the entire problem statement, you know what the community is going to what the community is going to benefit from your contributions, and how you're going to go about your project. So that shows that you're independently driven. And one common question that is usually asked is when to start contributing. And I'd say that usually the deadlines for Google Summer of Code and Outreachy lies around, like the application process starts around January, and it's always better to start early. So if you're interested in any of these programs, just start prior to the application process so that you get acquainted with the organization. And for Google Summer of Code, I'd suggest you could start around December or November to get an upper hand over the application process. Then people ask that what are the prerequisites before contributing. So open source has one advantage, that there is absolutely no prerequisite. Every project would have its own skill set. So while before contributing, there's just one thing that gives like it's always good to be comfortable with any version control system. With version control system, you could try looking up Git and understanding Git and understanding which all commands are used for which all purposes. So that could be a good learning, and that could definitely be being comfortable in Git would definitely help you get a better grasp of what open source is. Yeah.
So am I audible?
Yeah.
So for electronics and communication field, I just want to go over the various subfields which you can explore over your graduation period. So these are the major subfields: VLSI, communication systems, control system and robotics, embedded systems, and signal and image processing. So I'll just discuss each of them in brief. Bhavya, next slide, please. Yeah, so for VLSI, VLSI is basically the field where we work with manufacturing the chips. So it consists of everything from designing the chips on online softwares, and then like testing them on firstly on the softwares, then printing them on silicon, and then again testing. Like that's a whole flow. Like there's a it consists of many steps. So each step is a different job in itself. So like some of the engineering jobs in VLSI that you can see are like first is here CAD engineer. So when you design the whole IC integrated circuit on a tool, it consists of like designing in various layers and everything. So it consists of a tool where you draw everything, like there in a transistor there are N-well, P-well and everything. So those kind of designing jobs are called as CAD engineering. And then there are synthesis engineers who basically convert the logic gates into netlists, and then also optimize the netlists and then like work on them for testing and all. So that is the work of synthesis engineer. Then DFT engineer basically makes DFT full form is design for test. So they design the circuit that is made after the various steps, and then find the flaws in them, and then later on again they are manufactured if the flaws are like lot of flaws are there. Then foundry engineer is basically the job where which involves printing those circuits on silicon. So like after the online and software work is done, they also print them on silicon, like actually manufacture the chips. So that is done by foundry engineers, and within the foundry engineers also there will be various subdomains also. Then there are AMS engineer, which worked on basically mixed signals, analog mixed signals, like that's an analog field. Then there are ASIC verification engineers. So ASIC is basically the ICs which contain some application specific work. So those ICs need to be verified and need to be developed, those IPs and all, so that are done by the ASIC verification engineers. Then there are RF engineers which work on basically radio frequencies, and like they are used for wireless communication as well. Then there are FPGAs which come under reconfigurable computing, that you can reconfigure. Like its functionality is not fixed, and you can reconfigure according to your use. So these are the various subfields in VLSI. Like definitely you cannot explore each of them within the college, but like these are the fields some of which you may want to explore. And also while going to industry, you will be like given one of these tasks in VLSI field. So to explore VLSI, the courses that you can take are DVD, digital VLSI design, then VLSI design flow, embedded logic design, digital hardware design, advanced ELD, then RF circuit design and memory design related courses. Okay, next slide, please. Then the next subfield is communication systems. So communication systems can consist of radar systems. So radar system basically tells you the direction of the targets, position of the target, and velocity of the target, all of those stuff. So the applications of radar systems can be controlling the traffic. It can be air traffic or ground traffic. Like you might have seen that the cops, they get to know the velocity by which you are moving in the roads. So they use radars to tell the velocity and then like catch who are not following the speed traffic rules. Then for weather forecasting, for space surveillance, self-driving cars, military applications, in all of these fields, you need to tell the position, direction, speed of the targets. So in all of these things, radar systems can be used. Then there are wireless communication systems like which work on RF frequencies. Like you have seen 5G, Wi-Fi, all of these come under this. Then a specialized field of wireless communication is mobile communication, which basically consists of moving wireless communications, like where the transmitters and receivers might not be fixed. Then there are antennas which might be used in various systems. They can be used in radar systems and different systems. So that's another field. Then there are optical information systems, and there are green information and communication technologies. So these are various subfields within communication systems. Okay, next slide, please. Yeah. So control systems and robotics. So control system is basically a system which regulates the behavior of a system by controlling the output. Like if you suppose want to make the robot follow a path from point A to point B, so you will have to have a controller which will basically control the output. Like in the right figure, you can see the controller shown here is a closed loop container. Like controller, it takes the feedback from the output as well. So controller will need to basically give some output such that the robot will get the direction as the desired direction and the desired position also. So this plant is basically a system that is a process that is making it work, making the robot work. So this is the work of the controller. And the applications can be drones. For example, if you want to make the drone follow a particular path, or you want to hover it on a certain region. So all of these will be controlled by the control systems. Then there are demonstration learning. Demonstration learning are the systems which follow, like if you can demonstrate them one task, they will follow it. Suppose there is a robot. If you just show it how to pick a class and keep at some other position, it will just follow that on later on. Like you can use it in your homes to make it do your work. And then there are missile launching. In that also, like you need to launch the missiles in a particular direction. So in that also you will need control systems. And then in cooling systems in cars also, like you will need to control the temperature. You will need to sense the current temperature, and then the controller will control the temperature accordingly. So these are the subfields where the control systems can be applied. Next slide. Then there are embedded systems. So there are systems which contain a combination of hardware and software. Like you might have seen ATM machines, smartwatches, self-driving cars, automatic washing machines. So these are the systems which have hardware and software, and they are basically fulfilling the functionality of automation. So one example is for embedded systems is FPGAs. So on FPGAs, like in second year in Triple ID, there is a course, embedded logic design, where you work with FPGAs. So that is something you can explore in college for embedded systems. Next slide. There is another subfield known as signal processing, where you might want to process various types of signals, such as audio signals, speech signals, video signals, image signals. Also, signal processing is required in radars and sonars. Like in radar, you work with signals at different frequencies, which just get reflected back, and you need to process those signals. In sonar, you work with sound signals. So these are the areas where signal processing is required. So so like in these, after you explore all of these fields, like after finding the interest where you want to go, like first thing is basically you can work with your college professors on some particular field, and then like you have internships, you have courses, and also like after college, if you want to go to jobs in these particular profiles, like it might be possible that in all of these profiles, companies won't be visiting your college. So mainly, I think for VLSI, they visit the colleges, like they will visit for very general profiles. So if you want to apply for very specific profiles, you might need to either apply off campus, or you might need to ask for openings from your professors under whom you might be working. Like this is a very good option, especially in ECE, because the professors are having like very good contacts in industry. Plus, like this is a field which requires extra specialization. Like after BTech, it's little hard to get into very much specialized field. So like if you have some professor who can like guide you, it will be much better. Like some of some of the companies prefer MTech students for EC jobs, but after BTech also there are lots of jobs. But for specialization jobs, you might need to uh, get specific guidance from your professors.
So let's move on to the next topic, and that is research. So there are several motivations for one to engage in research during their undergraduate studies itself. So one might feel that doing research is a bit too early maybe, but IIITD is especially a research-oriented institute, and you would definitely enjoy exploring research in your UG. So what does research give you? So research experience is really helpful for admission for higher studies and even for employment if you wish to go for a research-oriented role. It helps you gain a lot of skills. So it helps you learn how to develop research ideas and learn the methods that are required for one to carry out or conduct a research project. It helps you explore areas of your interest and passion. And lastly, but not the least, it helps you form contacts and relationships with professors and maybe other seniors, mentors, or PhD students who could write LORs for you. So here are a few research opportunities in the form of summer internship programs. So all of the internships mentioned here are academic internships. So these are really, really prestigious, and getting through one of these would sort of be a highlight of your undergraduate studies if you make it. And you would definitely have an out-of-the-world experience with these. So you also get to collaborate with students who are working in those particular institutes or other interns, and not to mention the professors and the lab members of these institutes over a period of 2 to 3 months if you get selected. So these programs generally also require you to indicate your projects of interest. So each of these programs have their own timelines. Most of them open towards the summers only when we have our summer break. That would be around April to July or August or September. So you should be on the lookout since around January or February, or maybe even earlier since December. And you should keep a close check on their websites to see when the program opens and what their requirements are to make it through. So most of these programs also require you to indicate certain professors whose labs you are interested in or projects that you are interested in. And starting looking out earlier or exploring the projects earlier might give you a very good leverage. Then you also have industrial research. Companies like Microsoft, Adobe, Google, Intel, Vadhwani AI, IBM, and Snap Research offer a lot of research internships and fellowship experience for undergraduate students as well. So you could look into these and their timelines too. So what are the different ways to engage in research? So to start off, you could apply to work with a research lab within your college or also outside your college. And this can happen in two ways. Either the lab has a fixed recruitment process, so you could reach out to the lab members, any student who is currently working there, or the professor directly, and you can ask them about the recruitment process if the lab has any. Otherwise, you could directly mail the professors with your resume and your interests and see if they would be open to have you for some research project. So this is generally a nice way to get started with research in undergraduate studies. Another way could be that you take credited work as independent project or BTech thesis if your college has such programs. So IIIT Delhi does offer IP and BTPs. So this is also a great way to get started with research while getting credited for it and also while getting a grade for it. So you would be receiving weekly or bi-weekly guidance from your professor, and you would be learning how to start a research project from scratch or how to pick up an ongoing research project, and that would be a great experience. You could also apply for research internships at other universities, like we discussed a few opportunities in the previous slide. So these would generally require you to write a SOP, statement of purpose, your resume. It could have essay questions. It can have you could be required to indicate your areas or projects of interest. This is highly likely to require letters of recommendation. So again, you could approach your professors whom you've worked with or taken courses with. It requires a transcript, so maintaining a decent grade above 8 would be considered decent by all means, but definitely people who have a GPA above 9 would get a leverage. But yeah, you should have a decent grade. And if you have prior publications, that could make set you up for a very strong case to get a research internship. So another opportunity could be that you apply for research internships or fellowships at companies. These would also generally require you to submit SOPs, resumes, and LOR or referrals. So you could contact people who are already working with that company, and if they could give you a referral or if they could allow you to sit for an interview process, that could be a great way to get in, especially for Microsoft Research. Then you would again require your transcripts, and in this case you could also have an interview. So there could be an interview with academic research internship processes also, but those would likely focus more on your projects and your research that you have done so far. But over here the interview can also include some knowledge of DSA and algorithms. And again, publications make your case really strong. Another way is cold mailing professors, though this might seem inefficient to start with, but there is definitely a good chance that if you share good ideas of interest, like and you basically match your interests with the prior work that the professor has done or the ongoing work in the lab. So if you're able to connect your work with that and share your interests, then you might have a high chance of getting a response from the professor and also ultimately working with the professor. So yeah. So I'll briefly also cover higher education. So if you're interested or inclined towards higher education, you could typically start preparing when you enter your third year. So there are several courses that people like to choose immediately after their BTech. So one could be Master of Science, MS. Then there could be PhD. You could also go for an MBA if you're interested in that, or an MTech or MDes, which is Master in Design Studies. So these are the general application requirements. It is going to highly vary depending upon the institute and the country to which you're applying. So this is just a very generic and broad guideline of the kind of exams that you have to take for the kind of degree that you want to pursue and the requirements. So GATE is a necessary requirement for doing MTech in India. GRE would be required for an MS or PhD in USA and also in other foreign institutes. So even though GRE is primarily for USA, but most other institutes would require you to submit a GRE score, or even if that is not a mandatory requirement of the application, possibly submitting a great GRE score would again strengthen your chances to get selected there. Then TOEFL and IELTS are also required for most programs in foreign institutes. So you can check independently for each institute depending upon the degree, but it's highly likely that you would be required to submit your test scores for either of these exams. Then CAT is a requirement for MBA in India. GMAT would be a requirement for MBA in foreign institutes. And NIFT MDes exam or SEED exams. There are also several other exams for MDes, so you could look them up depending upon the institute you wish to apply for. So these could be some of the requirements for doing an MDes in India. Then apart from the exam scores, so for exams you would require a bit of preparation, at least maybe 2 or 3 months. And apart from the exams, there would be certain other requirements, like you would require prior research experience for an MS or PhD application. You could require some work experience or leadership skills for applying for an MPA. Then you would definitely require a statement of purpose or letter of motivation for these, and up to 2 or 3 letters of recommendations from professors or people you've worked with through internships or your job experience. You would definitely require to submit a resume, and then possibly if you're going for studies abroad, you would want to have some scholarships or a teaching assistantship to sponsor your studies abroad. So these are some of the some requirements that go into preparing for higher education. So Pragya would cover entrepreneurship now.
Hello, hi everyone. Okay, so I just have really one slide prepared because I hurt my right hand and my left arm, so I couldn't really type much. Also, there's, not a lot of content per se. I mean, it's going to be more of me talking. So yeah, thank you for being here, and I'm glad you believe that I might have something valuable to share. So yeah, I mean, my brain went into a total spiral when Bhavya approached me, that they're preparing this session which could act as a guide on exploring different things in college. So I'll be honest, there isn't really, a set path per se for entrepreneurship. Let's say, for guidance on, like just elite code hai, like if you solve 500 questions on that, there's a high chance that you'll be able to crack a nice interview. But aisa nahi hai that if you read 500 ideas, suddenly an idea is going to strike in your mind. So yeah, that's there. So it's about, as I've written, it's about your presence of mind, it's about your observation skills, it's about empathy, how empathetic you are in identifying with different groups of people and understand the problems they face so that you can come up with an approach with a solution to that problem. So there are, like, although I said there is no set path per se, but there are a few healthy practices that I would encourage you all to take part in. So take part in ideathons, take part in hackathons, take part in competitions that put your brain into movement. Do all of that. So in your undergraduation, you will find a lot of so there are a lot of boot camps that keep happening in our college itself, in different colleges, and most of them don't really have a fee, or if they have a fee, it's nominal. And if there is a high, like the fee is on the higher end, what you can so they usually offer scholarships based on your ideas. Like so if there's a boot camp, it usually has an application process. You apply, you write about, they'll ask about what idea you're working on, or what ideas you've been working upon. You talk about them, and based on the quality of the ideas, the enthusiasm they see in you, about you. It's so initially, every startup is about it's about the founder. It's a little different term here, but the people who are working on the ideas become more important than the idea themselves in the very initial stages. So that's one thing. A lot of institutions, they offer incubation. So let's say IIIT Delhi itself offers incubation. If there are a lot of institutes that do that, and if all the institutes are open to receiving applications from every college. It's not like IIIT Delhi ka incubation will not accept application from some other college, or some other college will not accept application from a student of Triple IT Delhi. It's always about, so you need to keep your eyes open for opportunities. There are a lot of them. There are a lot of them. It's not just about then incubation. Then there are other things like grants. Grants are usually for जो थोड़े social entrepreneurship के side पे ideas and projects होते हैं, it's usually for them. But I mean, I've seen organizations who offer grants for undergrad students as other, like depending on what domain they're working upon. So that is there. I personally have been part of one startup school. So it was organized by IIM Ahmedabad, CII.co. So that's a VC form, and it was wonderful. I must say, essay, so before joining that, I honestly was very reluctant, because I also had always been informed ki entrepreneurship may, you learn everything through experience, you learn everything as a ठोकर खा के, you'll make mistakes, you learn. So that is there, that definitely is there. But if you get the opportunity to learn through somebody else's experiences as well, it's going to be great. It's definitely going to be great. It will ease your process a lot. And yeah, that's there. So yeah, that is one thing. Then there are a lot of other things as well. I really don't want to go into jargons, because ye cheezein, you learn through the process itself. Like there are depths, there are loans, there are like people share your equity, then you want money. You want somebody else's money to scale up your startup and all of that. If you're interested in knowing about them or talking about them, just feel free to hit me up. I'll be happy to answer that, but I won't be talking about them here. So coming back to what all healthy practices you should take part in. So it was so ideathons, hackathons, competitions, that's there. Second very important thing that I would suggest you all is network. Interact with your peers, interact with your seniors, try to identify who does your vision align with. It's not like suddenly a team ban jate. It's like one person has something cooking up in their head, then they're going to approach someone, and they link them with somebody else, and if they think they are interested in it, you cook something together. So it's like that. So try to network, and like just try keeping a check on, or just telling people what you are interested in, what they're working upon. You never know, kab opportunity tum khud hi build kar lo, opportunity aaye na aaye. So that's the other thing. Third, I would really, this is something which I personally was very scared of, and I kind of regret that, because in my first year, I was working on one startup which I dropped because I didn't have a team, and I didn't have the courage to approach people and ask people, like, do you want to work with me? Have you worked upon this? And later I was told that Midas Lab was working on something similar, but it's all in the past. So do not do that. Do not be scared to ask for help or for mentorship. So that's another thing. Last thing, that this is really important. Joanna, the startup which I mentioned was actually an extension of the project which I was doing on. So people who are part of Triple IT community, PIS may, I had that project, and yeah, that was there. So I would really recommend you all to focus on your college projects. They could be the starting point of who knows what. जो भी opportunities मिल रही हैं, जो भी resources हैं, try to maximize their usage. Second year, first year, these are the times where it's very tempting to not focus a lot on these things, but yeah, that's there. Everything costs something. So entrepreneurship, it's something where there's a very, very high risk. Uncertainty बहुत ज़्यादा होती है, but then the returns are also very high, although slow, but very high. So yeah, that's there. And most of the time you'll not really know what's the best thing or the right thing from a strategy point of view, what that is. But also you'll never know what might work until you try. So always try, keep trying. But yeah, so set big goals. Don't forget to appreciate little things. Entrepreneurship is a very, very, very long and tiring journey, but break it down. There are a lot of steps to everything. Once you sit patiently, once you compose your head, all of that is gonna be there. So that's there. And fortunately triple IT offers a lot of courses once you, so you will get the access to, you can opt for these courses once you enter into your third year, so you don't necessarily have to but wait for them, wait for that time. Triple There is entrepreneurship cell in the college, there is incubation center, mails aati hain bahut sari, don't ignore them. Keep reading all of that, and yeah, all of that is there. And yeah, I mean, you all can write to me if you want to. I'll drop my email address, and I'm very much interested in, if you have any ideas, anything comes up to me, I'm always open for discussion. So yeah, that's all from my end. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Pragya. So yeah, that brings us to the near end. That brings us to the near end of this discussion. So here are some things that you could do after college. So it's just kind of a summary of what all you do in your college, which leads to what you're going to do after your college. So you can have SD or SWE roles, you can have PM roles. There is a session that was conducted by Women in Tech about PM roles earlier, so you could refer to that. Then you could go into entrepreneurship, you could do research, you could do industrial research, or you could go for higher education immediately after college. So yeah, thank you everyone for attending, and as it goes, take it all one day at a time and enjoy the journey. Enjoy the journey. So if there are any questions you want to ask to any speaker, you can unmute and ask, or you could drop your questions in the chat as well. Yeah, Anushka, we will try to share the meeting as soon as possible.
For EC, I want to add one thing. Like at the end, I told that for roles other than VLSI, there might not be companies approaching your like coming on campus, but there might be companies coming as well, and there might be many other ways through which you can get into those fields. So don't be scared to take up those streams. And like as Pragya mentioned for entrepreneurship, here also, like do not ignore the mails that come from college. Like I know someone from Triple IT who like got into Microsoft Research in EC field through a mail that came from someone on email ID that was shared to all the students. So do not ignore those mails. They are like very important sometimes. Like they are very good places. And like yeah, like as I mentioned, like your professors can also guide you very nicely in various fields. So even if the companies are not approaching for some field for some field in your college, do not be afraid to take up those fields, because they can be like very interesting, and you might have very easy ways through some other means as well for those fields. Yeah.
So we will be sharing the Google Sheet over our Telegram channel. So keep a look for that. We don't have it compiled currently. So we'll enlist all of these opportunities in the sheet and share it very soon, along with the recording for the session. Ria, could you elaborate on how to contact the different organizations and their projects for GSOC? There is a question in the chat.
Yeah, so there's on the Google Summer of Code website, you'll see a list of all the previous organizations that have come and all the previous projects that have been concluded. So you could try to have a look at, go on the Slack channels or on the communication channels that are there, probably the mailing list or every communication channel that they have, and try to look at their projects, and also like try to see that, if the community, if the organization has come for like straight for 5 years, so it has a greater probability to come this time also. So probably you could start looking that organization up and start looking at projects which usually come. So you could try to go in the issues page of the GitHub of their source code and try to fix, or try to just first of all like introduce yourself to the community, and after you're done, just try to fix some bugs, or just try to interact with the community, interact with the code base also. So in that way you could basically contact different organizations and their projects. So Like in case you feel at any point, if you feel that you're being stuck, or you want to contact the organization and you're not able to do that, or if you want any particular guidance regarding any specific community, specific project, or any specific technology, I'd say you could mail any of us, and let us, like, probably mail or telegram any one of us, and ask your questions. We'll be more than happy to discuss them with you.
So I'll stop recording here, and if there are any other questions, please feel free to ask.